Hey there, welcome to the channel. So today I want to talk about the issues with the airlines canceling all these flights. Okay, so I hear a lot of talk out there about the reasons that airlines are canceling tons and tons of flights. And much of that talk focuses on various things like, oh, there's a shortage of pilots. Oh, the airlines got a bailout and they were supposed to keep these employees, but instead they encouraged them to retire. And now they have a shortage of pilots. They have a shortage of flight crews, etc. But none of this is the reason for the flight cancellations. None of it at all. The reason for this is much more insidious. And I think at this point, given how often this is going on, it's like on a regular basis now, we have airlines canceling hundreds, if not thousands of flights. At this point, I believe that it's prima facie evidence that they are deliberately doing this. So let's understand what's happening. First of all, if you're an airline, you know what flight crews you have. You know all the rules, and you also know how many are going to not show up or call in sick or whatever. You have this operating data. You know, for example, like, hey, look, the weekend coming up, we have 5,000 flights. We have enough pilots and crew for these 5,000 flights, but we expect that maybe 5% of the crew will call out sick. So we have other people on call and we're going to be able to meet these flights, assuming there's no weather, anything like that. And then, so they know this, they know the history, they know everything. They know the crews, they know the probability that the crews are going to be sick or whatever's going on. They know all this information. So it's not plausible, especially given the fact that there's no serious weather. Now, it's a different thing when you're like in Atlanta and thunderstorms come through and just wipe out during the whole weekend and just wipe out your schedule. That's a totally different thing, but that's not what's happening now. What's happening now is this: airlines are either one, being corrupt in scheduling more flights than they actually can service, meaning that at the time that you go and you buy that flight, they know that we don't have enough pilots, we don't have enough crew to actually fly that flight. They know ahead of time. They're basically airlines that are canceling 1,000 flights on a weekend. They basically know there's no way at this point, like you could have given them a pass 2 months ago or the first time that this happened. But at this point, no, you can't give them a pass. They know that they're not going to be able to make that flight. And so now I would go into further speculation that they very, very well be doing something a little bit insidious. Is it possible that some of these airlines are like, hey, look, we've got a bunch of demand out there. We don't have enough crews to service the demand. However, if we let people book all these flights and we know, look, we're going to have to cancel 20% of our flights because we don't even have a crew scheduled for the flight. We're just going to let them buy tickets anyways. And then what we're going to do, is, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on getting the flights from feeders into hubs. Well, let's go with that too. Okay. So that what happens is on a July 4th weekend, hey, look, we sold all these flights. Let's prioritize the flights getting into the hubs, deprioritize the flights coming out of the hubs. In addition, we knew we were not going to have enough flight crews. So we knew we're going to have to cancel flights. But look how wonderful this works for them. They get a bunch of people that stranded away from their home airport at a hub, and then they cancel a bunch of flights. Now, how is this all going to work? Well, let's say you had a few flights that weren't 100% full, maybe only 60% full or 70% full. Well, gee, what's going to happen now? Well, you're going to delay that person 2-3 days, but you can be dang sure by then you're going to gather up enough people on that flight. So you're going to be flying these planes 100% full. And in addition, think about it. Once you've got the person on that first flight that brings them into your hub, you've got them. They're like a fish on a hook. They're stuck. The probability that they're going to follow through on some other flight is high, right? You got them. You just hooked them into the system. Now compare what would happen if you were an honest operating it as an honest company. If you were an honest company and you said, hey, look, we're not going to schedule flights that we have no hope of actually performing, right? And so what would happen? Then a bunch of people that would be looking for flights would be like, okay, well, there's no flights. There's no flights. So they would just make different plans. They wouldn't take the flight. And therefore, what? The company wouldn't make the money. They wouldn't be able to sell the ticket. However, the way it looks like they're currently doing it is that they're just overbooking flights they know they can't fly, or that they have a very low probability that they will be able to fly, so that they get the money. And they get the money, and whatever they're paying out in terms of like, oh, they give you a room or something is minimal at best, and they don't even do that anymore. They try to give you vouchers and stuff. And so think about what's really happening. That is, I think, what's really happening here. And this is something that, quite honestly, Buttigieg or whoever could really look into, because I get it. You know, when you're operating an airline, of course, they're going to overbook a little bit. Right. And that's perfectly legitimate to do when you're sitting there and you're saying, hey, look, on any given flight, on any given weekend, 5% of the people don't show up their flight, so we can overbook by 5%. Or you could say things like, hey, look, we have multiple flights going from A to B. Great example, San Diego, you have this, Southwest just has flights like every hour in the morning, like 6, 7, 8, 9. That's every morning. So, you know, if you were in a situation, you know, it would be a little less unethical to be like, hey, look, you know, we overbooked the 6 a.m. flight, but we know we have room. We can get that person there in the morning. We know we can do it. It's like, okay, we can get you there on the 7 a.m. We can get you there on the 8 a.m. You know what I mean? But that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is you're stranding passengers. You're deliberately overbooking by excessive amounts. I would dare to say, given how this has happened, that I would not be unsurprised if they're in a situation where they're literally like scheduling flights, booking flights that they don't have a crew for. And then basically they get to the point where the flight's supposed to take off and they're like, or you know, bored or whatever. And they're like, well, we got to cancel the flight. And they never even scheduled the crew for it. So this is really unacceptable behavior. This is just not acceptable behavior. You know, I'm not a big government guy at all, but you know, this is just something there. It seems like there's something that could be done to just at least discourage this kind of behavior. And I think also that it's, as I said, prima facie evidence. Like, you know, if you're sitting in there, you know, you can request, like if in the case the government can request, like, well, what was your scheduling? You know, what did you even have the crew scheduled to do this flight, and put a little pressure on them, you know, because the issue right now is that, you know, we don't have that much in the way of competition. Now, theoretically, it should work that you have a lot of competition, right? So, okay, airline A is screwing us over, so airline B comes up and they don't screw people over. So, you know, airline A loses, right? But that's not kind of what we have at this point. So that's where it is. So look, once again, summarizing here, the big issue is that they are, and how can I say this? I don't want, this is speculation. Let me say that. This is speculation, but I really believe that either one, they've just pushed it a little too far in terms of overbooking flights. And I think it's pretty clear based on the evidence that you're not talking about overbooking flights you're actually going to fly. You're actually overbooking the number of flights. So you're saying, well, I'm going to have 100 flights here, and they know they have crew for 90 flights. And then if a few of those people call in sick, then they only have crew for 85. That, I think, is what's happening here. And it's just surreal, and it's really just gotten to the point that it's out of control. So I think that's it for this one. I think that once again, you know, this whole focus on the shortage of pilots and this is really distracting from the point. The simple fact is that the airlines, yeah, they cut on staff. They encourage staff to retire. They don't have the staff. They can't bring the staff online to make the money that's sitting there. There's a pile of money sitting there because there's a pile of demand, but they don't have the infrastructure to support that demand. So instead, what they're doing is something that I think is very insidious. And that is they're deliberately overbooking, and not just a little bit. We're talking overbooking by massive amounts of flights. All right. Well, that's it for this one. Bye.